forest and the hut. I used to think I knew the woods behind my grandfather's farm like the back of my hand. Miles of mossy trails, forgotten deer paths, and secret clearings where the sunlight barely filtered in. I grew up running through those trees, picking blackberries in summer and hunting mushrooms every fall. It felt like home. Familiar. Safe. It was the first cold morning of October when I decided to go out alone, basket in hand, boots crunching over brittle leaves. The mist was heavier than usual, clinging low to the forest floor, swirling around my ankles like pale smoke. Still, I pressed on. I'd done it 100 times before. About an hour in, I realized I was deeper than I intended, way off my usual routes. I should have turned back. But just as I was about to, something caught my eye, a small cluster of golden chanterelles growing beneath a gnarled oak. Perfect. I knelt to pick them, feeling that quiet thrill only foragers know, the little victories the woods offer if you know where to look. That's when I noticed it. A trail, narrow and half-hidden, leading deeper into a part of the forest I didn't recognize. The trees bent oddly here, arching together at strange angles, as if forming a tunnel. The air smelled wrong, damp and metallic, like wet iron, and even the birdsong seemed to die off around me. I should have left the mushrooms, turned around, gone home. Instead, I followed the path. A few steps in, the light changed. Everything went dimmer, grayer, the way it does before a storm, except the sky above was clear. My chest tightened as I moved forward, crunching through the undergrowth that seemed to muffle every sound. That's when I saw it. Through the mist ahead, crouched low in a hollow of earth and root, was a hut. If you could even call it that. It looked too old to still be standing, walls made of blackened wood, the roof sagging under the weight of sod and tangled vines. No smoke from a chimney. No windows, just dark, gaping holes where glass must have once been. It felt wrong. Out of place. Like it wasn't built there so much as grown there, an infection rooted deep in the forest's heart. Something shifted behind one of the broken shutters. I froze, the basket slipping from my hand and landing softly among the ferns. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But I stayed rooted to the spot, heart hammering against my ribs so hard it hurt. And then, the door creaked open. Just a crack. Just enough to see the sliver of blackness yawning inside. Something was waiting in there. Something that knew I was coming. For a long moment, I couldn't move. The forest seemed to hold its breath with me. The mist curled tighter around my legs, and the smell, wet earth mixed with something sour, thickened in the back of my throat. Then I heard it. A voice. Faint, scratchy, like the crackle of an old radio tune just a little off. Come inside. The words were wrong, like they didn't belong to the voice that spoke them. Too deliberate, too precise, like someone trying to remember how to speak. I squinted into the doorway, but it was pure black inside. No movement. No shape. Just the endless, empty dark. Another voice, this time a child's, whispered urgently right behind me. Don't. I spun around, but there was no one there. Only the trees, still and silent. The trail behind me seemed longer than it should have, twisted and blurred by the mist, almost like the woods themselves were shifting. The sensible part of me screamed to run, to leave the basket, to shove my way back through the trees until I found the field and the sun and the world I knew. But curiosity, that dangerous little ember inside all of us, burned hotter. I took a step closer to the hut. The door creaked a little wider, almost invitingly. I swear I saw something just past the threshold, something low to the ground, hunched and shivering, but when I blinked, it was gone. Please, the first voice said again. Help me. This time it sounded almost human. Almost. I edged forward, boots sinking into the damp moss. Another step. Then another. My hand reached out without me meaning it to, fingers brushing the rough, splintered wood of the doorframe. The hut breathed against my skin, an exhale of cold, fetid air. And then, with a suddenness that punched the breath out of me, something inside the hut moved, fast, too fast, rushing toward the door. I stumbled back, heart slamming into my ribs, and the door slammed shut with a crack like a gunshot, sending a murder of crows shrieking from the trees above. The woods roared back to life all at once, wind rushing, branches groaning, unseen things rustling the underbrush. I turned and ran, not caring about the basket, not caring about the mushrooms, just sprinting blindly through the shifting, treacherous woods. But no matter how far I ran, the mist thickened, and the forest kept folding back on itself. I was lost. And somewhere behind me, through the thickening dark, I heard the door creak open again. I didn't stop running until my lungs burned and my vision blurred at the edges. The trees blurred too, tall and skeletal, leaning in like silent witnesses. The mist kept thickening, wrapping around my legs, pulling at my clothes like invisible hands. I stopped to catch my breath, bending over with my palms on my knees. That's when I heard the footsteps. Not behind me. Not ahead of me. All around me. Soft. Wet. As if bare feet were padding over the moss. Slow at first, but gradually speeding up, circling me, tightening the loop. I straightened up fast, heart banging in my ears, turning in frantic circles. I couldn't see anyone. Nothing but trees, mist, and shadows that seemed to twitch at the corners of my vision. Then, faintly, the child's whisper again, except this time, it wasn't behind me. It was above. You're not supposed to be here. I looked up. Something was crouched high in the branches, silhouetted against the faint gray light. Thin limbs wrapped around the trunk of a tree. Its head tilted at an impossible angle, watching me. Staring. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over a twisted root. I tried to find the path I'd come from, but every way looked the same now. Endless trees stretching into nowhere. The air grew colder. Every breath left a little cloud in front of my mouth. And then, from deep within the mist ahead of me, I saw it, the faint, flickering outline of a lantern. Someone was out there. A shape holding a light, swaying slightly as they moved deeper into the woods. I didn't have a choice. I had to follow. It was either that, or stay here with whatever was watching from the trees. Gripping my jacket tight around me, I started toward the light. But with every step I took, the forest around me changed, subtle at first, then more jarring. Trees twisted into unnatural shapes, roots splitting the ground like veins, the mist thinning in places to reveal patches of earth that looked burned, blackened as if by some old, unseen fire. And as I walked, that lantern-bearer stayed just ahead, always just out of reach. Leading me deeper. Leading me somewhere I knew I wasn't meant to go. The figure with the lantern moved like it was gliding, never breaking the thick silence, never slowing down. No matter how fast I tried to catch up, they stayed the same distance ahead, just a dim glow bobbing in the mist. I started noticing other things. Shapes along the edges of the trail, half hidden by trees. Figures standing perfectly still. Tall, gaunt, and wrong. Like mannequins left out in the woods to rot, their heads lolling sideways, arms hanging too long at their sides. They didn't move. But every time I blinked, they were closer. The ground beneath my boots grew softer. Wet. Each step made a sickening, sucking sound, like walking across something alive. I looked down once, and instantly regretted it. The forest floor wasn't earth anymore. It was flesh. Pale, veined, and gently pulsing under my feet. My stomach twisted, but I kept moving, kept my eyes on the lantern, even as a thick, low hum started to rise from the woods around me. A vibration you could feel in your bones, rattling teeth, setting something deep inside you on edge. The lantern swayed. The figure finally slowed, stopping at the base of a massive, dead tree whose trunk was split wide open like a yawning mouth. hollow inside, black and endless. The lantern-bearer stood motionless, arm outstretched, the light dangling over the entrance. An invitation. My breath steamed out in frantic puffs. Every instinct I had screamed to turn around, to run until my legs gave out, but the woods behind me had changed again. The trees had shifted closer, gnarled limbs woven together into a wall. There was no way back. It was forward, or nowhere. Swallowing hard, I stepped toward the hollow tree, heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped animal. As I passed the figure, I caught a glimpse of their face. Or rather, the space where a face should have been. Smooth skin stretched tight over an empty skull. No eyes. No mouth. Nothing but blank, glistening flesh. And yet somehow, I knew it was smiling. The instant I crossed the threshold into the hollow tree, the world shifted. It wasn't the woods anymore. The air grew damp and heavy, thick with a stench of rot and old stone. I stood inside a narrow tunnel, walls slick with moss and something darker, something that made my fingers burn when I brushed against it by accident. The passageway sloped downward, deeper into the earth. Behind me, the lantern light flickered once, and vanished. I was alone in the dark. Except I wasn't. From somewhere ahead, I heard breathing. Shallow, raspy, unnatural. It echoed off the walls, made it impossible to tell how close it was. I pressed forward blindly, one hand scraping the tunnel wall, the other stretched out uselessly in front of me. And then I heard the door. A heavy, grinding sound of wood on stone, deep below. Something was opening. And whatever had been waiting, was waking up. The breathing ahead grew faster, more desperate, like something huge and starved had caught my scent. I pressed forward, stumbling blindly, until the tunnel widened into a rough cavern where the ceiling disappeared into darkness. That's when I heard the first wet slap against stone. Something small, fast, scuttling just out of view. Then another. Then dozens. I froze, every muscle locked as faint shapes swarmed around the edges of the cavern, low to the ground, moving on too many limbs. The air filled with the sickly smell of damp fur and rotten leaves. I backed up slowly, trying not to make a sound. My boot scraped against a loose pebble, it clicked sharply against the stone floor. Instantly, the crawling things froze. In perfect, terrible unison, they turned their heads toward me. At least, I think they had heads. All I could see were glints, wet, glistening eyes catching the faintest hint of light. The silence stretched tight as a wire. Then, without warning, they rushed me. I ran, heart exploding in my chest, feet slipping and sliding over the slick ground. They were fast, faster than anything that should crawl on legs. I could hear them, sharp claws scrabbling against stone, eager panting, the low, guttural chittering of things that wanted me. There was only one way forward, a narrow tunnel barely wide enough for my shoulders. I dove for it, squeezing into the cramped passage just as the first of the things slammed into the cavern wall behind me with a sickening splat. I crawled frantically, scraping my hands raw against the rough rock, feeling the warm breath of the things behind me, so close I could hear the saliva dripping from their mouths. Something snagged my boot. Sharp claws dug into the leather, yanking hard. I kicked and thrashed, heel connecting with something soft. It let out a horrible, high-pitched shriek, and the grip loosened just enough for me to scramble free. I didn't stop. I didn't dare look back. The tunnel angled sharply downward again, and I slid uncontrollably, tumbling into darkness, arms flailing uselessly. And at the bottom of the slide, I landed hard. On a floor that moved. At first, I thought it was the blood rushing in my ears making the ground feel like it was pulsing. But no. The floor was breathing. I scrambled to my feet, boots slipping against something rubbery and warm. In the faint, sour-smelling air, I could make out the texture under my hands, slick, veined, almost like the underside of a toad. The surface shifted beneath me, a slow undulation, as if something huge slept just beneath this thin skin of ground. And somewhere deep inside it, I could hear a heartbeat. Steady. Heavy. Alive. I stumbled backward, nearly falling again, until my back hit something upright. A pillar. No, when my fingers brushed over it, I realized it wasn't stone. It was a column of bodies. Human bodies. Faces pressed together, mouths slack, eyes open but glazed over, as if frozen mid-scream. Their skin had fused into a single writhing mass, arms and legs twisted together in grotesque knots. I jerked away, bile rising in my throat. The cavern was full of them. Rows and rows of these pillars, stretching into the misty gloom beyond my sight. Some were silent. Others shifted slightly, as if the souls trapped inside hadn't quite given up yet. A low sound rose from the darkness, something between a moan and a sigh, thick with sorrow and hunger. From the corner of my eye, I saw something else move. Not the pillars. Not the floor. Something between them. Something that crawled and slithered, impossibly tall and thin, limbs bending the wrong way. Its head turned toward me, but there were no eyes, just raw, gaping holes where a face should have been. The same blankness as the figure with the lantern. And somehow, deep in my gut, I knew, this was the owner of the hut. And now that I was here, it wasn't going to let me leave. The thing in the darkness didn't rush me. It didn't need to. It moved with a slow, slithering certainty, its limbs too long, joints bending outward with sickening cracks as it crept between the pillars of fused bodies. The sound it made, low, rhythmic, seemed to burrow under my skin, a vibration that rattled my teeth and sent goosebumps racing down my arms. I backed away slowly, trying not to trip, trying not to scream. Every fiber of my body knew instinctively, if I ran, it would be faster. If I screamed, it would be closer. Behind the creature, in the far corners of the cavern, more shapes stirred. Smaller ones. They clung to the pillars, heads twitching like birds, dozens, maybe hundreds of them, peering from the shadows. I couldn't see their faces clearly, but I could feel their attention locking onto me. Heavy. Suffocating. They weren't crawling toward me yet. They were waiting. The tall creature lifted one arm, bones creaking audibly under stretched, translucent skin. Slowly, it pointed at me with a long, gnarled finger. The breathing around me deepened. The walls of the cavern seemed to contract, a slow, suffocating pulse drawing everything tighter. The heartbeat under the living floor pounded louder, faster, rattling my bones, flooding my veins with cold, sour fear. And then the whisper came. Stay. The word wasn't spoken aloud. It was pushed into my head. A raw, alien command, scraping across my thoughts like claws on glass. I felt my knees buckle, my arms shake. A pressure settled on my chest, heavy enough to make breathing painful. Some part of me, the stubborn, stupid part, resisted. Some tiny ember of no lit in my mind. And the creature seemed to feel it. It tilted its head slowly, curiously, almost amused. The air grew colder. The shadows deepened. The waiting things started to move, crawling down from their perches with soft, wet sounds, creeping toward me from every side. I turned and ran, into the darkness, into the unknown, into anything that wasn't this. I didn't even care where anymore. Just away. Somewhere behind me, I heard a sound that didn't belong in any sane world, a deep, furious roar, like a hurricane made of broken voices, and the living floor beneath my feet began to crack. I sprinted blindly across the flexing, groaning floor as it began to split open beneath me. Thin seams tore through the flesh-like surface, spilling out a thick, black liquid that smelled like rusted iron and rot. Ahead, a jagged tear widened suddenly, too wide to jump. Without thinking, I veered left, feet sliding over the trembling ground, barely keeping my balance. Behind me, the roar built into something bone-shaking, a monstrous wail of rage and hunger. I didn't dare look back. Shapes lunged from the cracks, bony, wet arms clawing at the air, reaching for me. One hand brushed my ankle, cold and slimy, and I kicked free with a desperate grunt. The tunnel ahead narrowed into a jagged break in the cavern wall. Not a doorway, not even a passage, just a rough wound in the stone. But it was my only chance. I threw myself toward it just as the floor behind me buckled and collapsed completely, swallowing everything into the churning, black void below. I barely squeezed through the gap, scraping my shoulders bloody on the rough rock. A hand, too long, too many fingers, scraped across the opening behind me, trying to grab hold. I heard it scratch and hiss in frustration as I scrambled away down a steep, crumbling slope. The sound of pursuit faded for a moment. But the forest wasn't done with me. The slope ended abruptly in another clearing, and this time, there was light. A faint, sickly green glow coming from strange, mushroom-like growths that clustered along the tree trunks. The ground here was different too, softer, but not breathing, thank God. I stumbled into the clearing, gasping, my head spinning with exhaustion and fear. And that's when I saw it. Another hut. This one was worse. It stood tilted, half sunken into the earth, its wood slimy with moss, its door hanging loose on broken hinges. The roof was riddled with holes, and a crooked, rusted weather vane turned lazily atop it, squeaking in the dead air. And from inside the darkened doorway, something waited. I could feel it. Watching. Smiling. Calling me in. But this time, the choice wasn't mine. The trees behind me began to creak and shudder, and the earth trembled as if something impossibly large was forcing its way through the roots and stones. The only way left was forward. Toward the second hut. Toward whatever fresh horror waited inside. I approached the broken doorway like a man creeping toward his own grave. The glow from the fungus outside barely touched the interior. It was darker than dark inside, thick, syrupy blackness that seemed to swallow the light. The air reeked of mold and something sweeter, almost sickly sweet, like rotting fruit mixed with decay. Every instinct I had told me to turn back. But the woods behind me cracked and groaned under the weight of whatever was moving out there. Twisted shapes writhed between the trees, hulking silhouettes slithering closer, patient and relentless. There was no time left to hesitate. I crossed the threshold. The temperature dropped instantly. My breath misted in the stale air. The inside of the hut was wrong, larger than it should have been, stretching into shadowed hallways that shouldn't have fit inside such a crooked shell of a building. And the walls. God, the walls. They were lined with faces. Not portraits. Faces. Pressed into the wood, straining out as if trying to escape, their mouths open in frozen screams, their eyes wild with terror. Some were old. Some were fresh. Some seemed to still move, just slightly, lips twitching, eyelids fluttering. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the uneven floorboards, which were slick with a dark, viscous slime. That's when the door slammed shut behind me with a deafening bang. And the faces on the walls whispered in unison. You shouldn't have come. A chill tore down my spine so violently I almost collapsed. The whispers grew louder, layering over each other until it sounded like 1,000 voices pressed against my ears, gibbering, pleading, warning. Through the babble, one voice rose clearer than the rest, a child's, thin and trembling. Don't listen to them. Find the stairs. Before it sees you. My pulse hammered wildly. I scanned the room, no stairs, only 2 doorways leading deeper into the impossible labyrinth of the hut. Behind one doorway, I heard wet breathing, slow and heavy. Behind the other, silence. I didn't trust silence anymore. But breathing meant it was close. I took the silent hallway. Every step I took made the faces along the walls strain harder, their wooden prisons groaning with effort. Some wept. Some mouthed silent screams. some just watched me with wide, endless eyes. The floor slanted downward as I moved, and a strange realization crept over me. This hut wasn't just a building. It was alive. And it was drawing me deeper. The hallway twisted downward like the throat of some vast, dying beast. The air grew thicker with every step I took. The faces on the walls became fewer, but those that remained were different. Less human. Their features stretched and melted, as if the hut was forgetting how to copy the people it devoured. Ahead, the hallway split. And standing at the fork was another person. At least, it looked like one at first. A man, maybe late 30s, wearing a battered flannel jacket and muddy jeans. He was hunched forward, one hand gripping the wall as if struggling to stay upright. His face was pale, drenched in sweat, and his eyes, God, his eyes, were wide with panic, darting from doorway to doorway. When he saw me, he staggered closer, arms outstretched. You're real, he gasped, voice cracking. Please, don't go that way, it's in the floor, it's under. Something snapped. Without warning, the floor beneath him buckled like a breathing lung, and a jagged, spiked root shot up from the wood. It impaled him clean through the stomach, lifting him off his feet like a grotesque marionette. His scream was short. Choked off. Blood spilled down the root in thick ropes, hissing where it touched the floor, as if even the hut hated it. The man's body twitched, his limbs jerking in unnatural spasms. His head lolled backward, mouth still moving silently. For a moment, our eyes met, and in them, I saw a terrible, gut-wrenching thing. Relief. As if he was glad it was over. The root retracted slowly, slurping the corpse into the floor like feeding a maw. Within seconds, there was no sign he had ever existed. Only a wet, red smear on the warped wood. The hallway shuddered, satisfied. I staggered backward, bile burning my throat, heart hammering so hard it made my vision pulse. The faces on the walls began to murmur again, soft, mournful voices weaving a warning through the dark. It will take you too. And somewhere below, down in the unseen heart of the hut, something heavy stirred. It had smelled fresh blood. And now, it was coming up. The floor beneath my boots began to pulse, no longer a steady heartbeat, but a rapid, hungry thudding, as if the hut itself had tasted the man's blood and craved more. Cracks raced along the hallway walls, splitting the wood with sharp snaps, sending splinters raining down. The faces trapped in the walls wailed in chorus, their eyes rolling wildly in terror. The air grew impossibly heavy. Breathing felt like trying to suck molasses into my lungs. And then I heard it. The slow, dragging scrape of something enormous pulling itself up from the deep. Closer. Closer. I ran. Blindly. The hallway twisted and lurched beneath my feet like a wounded animal, but I didn't stop. Doorways yawned open on either side, revealing glimpses of things I don't want to describe, rooms filled with bone furniture, staircases that spiraled into pitch-black mouths, paintings that bled when I looked at them too long. At the end of the hall, a narrow staircase plunged downward. I hesitated for half a heartbeat, and that's when I saw it rounding the corner behind me. The creature. The thing that owned the hut. It was dragging itself forward on spindly arms, its body a mass of glistening muscle and bone, stitched together in ways that made no sense. Its head, or what passed for one, brushed the ceiling, long and narrow, covered in a tangle of wet, black hair that moved like tendrils. Its mouth opened vertically down its face, a jagged, yawning slit filled with rows of twitching teeth. No eyes. It didn't need them. It knew where I was. It screamed, a sound so loud and low it shook the breath from my body, and surged forward, the walls of the hallway bending outward under its weight. I bolted for the stairs. The faces along the walls howled louder, their mouths splitting wider, as if trying to swallow me or warn me. It didn't matter. I threw myself down the staircase 2, 3 steps at a time, tumbling near the bottom but scrambling back to my feet. The room I landed in was vast and empty except for one thing. A door. Massive, ancient-looking, embedded into the far wall. Black wood, iron bands hammered across it, and carved deep into the surface, symbols that hurt my eyes to look at, like they were still moving. The door thrummed with power. I didn't know why. I didn't care. All I knew was the thing was right behind me, and if I stayed in this room, I was dead. Or worse. I ran to the door, grabbed the iron handle, it was ice cold, and pulled with everything I had. The door opened. And a cold wind screamed out from the darkness beyond. Not air. Not wind. Something much older. Something hungry. The door swung wider with a groan like mountains grinding together. The darkness beyond wasn't empty. It was thick. Alive. It rolled and twisted like smoke underwater, swallowing the faint light from the room behind me. Shapes flickered inside it, massive, shifting forms that never fully revealed themselves. I smelled salt, burning wood, and something coppery, like blood left too long in the sun. Behind me, the creature screeched again, so loud the stone beneath my feet cracked. It was in the stairwell. Coming. With a final, desperate breath, I stepped through the door. The world folded inward. For a heartbeat, I felt weightless, no up, no down, just endless, churning dark. I saw flashes, a forest upside down, rivers running with black oil, a sky stitched together with screaming faces. And somewhere far below me, something vast and blind and dreaming began to stir at the scent of my trespass. I landed hard on cold stone, coughing, gasping. I was in another place now. Another part of the hut. Or maybe, something deeper. Before me stretched a bridge, narrow, crumbling, suspended over an endless abyss. The only path forward. The sides were lined with ragged statues, each one twisted in agony, mouths open in silent screams. The bridge groaned under an invisible wind, rocking dangerously. And standing at the center of the bridge was the man in the flannel jacket. The one who'd died. Only, he wasn't human anymore. His body was stitched and twisted, his skin slick and pale as candle wax. His eyes, those wide, terrified eyes, had been gouged out, leaving black, gaping holes that wept dark fluid. He turned toward me slowly, head cocked at an unnatural angle. And in a voice that was not his own, he spoke. One must stay. One must cross. Choose. Behind me, I heard it, the monster from the hut, clawing its way into this new world, dragging its bloated body across the threshold. There was no time to think. The bridge. The abyss. The stitched man blocking the way. One choice. One chance. Or I would join the screaming faces forever. The stitched man lurched closer, dragging one foot with a sickening scrape. His empty eye sockets locked onto me, unblinking. One must stay. One must cross. The words echoed again, but they didn't sound like a command anymore. They sounded like a sentence. The thing behind me, the thing from the hut, was almost through. I could hear its claws ripping at the stone floor, its breath rattling like a dying engine. I had seconds. The stitched man lifted a shaking hand, reaching out. And that's when I understood. I could shove him into the abyss. Use him as an offering. Maybe the bridge would let me pass. Or I could turn around. Face the monster. And stay. Be the one to feed the cycle. I didn't want to die. I didn't want to become another face on the wall. The stitched man took another staggering step forward, hand trembling, mouth opening as if to plead. I rushed him. We collided at the center of the bridge. His body was cold, brittle, like frozen leather. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed his twisted frame and threw all my weight into a shove. For a second, he clung to me, fingers clawing at my jacket with unnatural strength, dragging his ruined face close to mine. I saw his mouth move. "I'm sorry." And then he fell, tumbling soundlessly into the abyss, swallowed by the dark. The bridge shuddered beneath me. The statues lining the edges seemed to sigh, a soft ripple passing through them. And in the distance, beyond the narrow crossing, a door appeared. Bright. White. Open. Freedom. Behind me, the creature howled, infuriated, denied its meal. I didn't look back. I ran, the bridge swaying wildly underfoot, pieces crumbling and falling into the pit below. Each step felt like a lifetime. Each breath a theft from the thing that hunted me. Closer. Closer. The door blazed brighter. And just as I reached the threshold, the bridge gave way completely behind me, collapsing into nothingness. I threw myself through the doorway. And everything went white. The light swallowed me whole. For a moment, there was nothing, no sound, no weight, no thought. Just a perfect, blinding emptiness that wrapped around me like a second skin. And then I gasped awake. I was lying in a clearing. The morning mist clung low to the ground. Sunlight, real and golden, streamed through the trees. The forest looked normal again, familiar. Birds called overhead. I could even hear the distant rustle of a deer slipping through the underbrush. For a second, I thought it had all been a nightmare. A hallucination. But when I sat up, I saw the basket. My basket of mushrooms. Still sitting there in the ferns, just where I had dropped it hours, or lifetimes, ago. And on the ground beside it, a single, withered face. Pressed into the soil. Mouth open. Eyes wide. Frozen in the same terror I had seen in the walls of the hut. I stumbled backward, heart hammering, bile rising in my throat. The trees seemed to lean closer for a moment, listening. Somewhere deep in the woods, just out of sight, I heard the faint creak of a door slowly opening. The hut was still there. Waiting. Watching. I hadn't escaped. Not really. The forest had let me go. For now. But in my gut, I knew the truth. Once you step off the path, once you hear the voice behind the door, the woods never really let you leave. They just wait. Until you come back. The end. Or maybe, the beginning.